Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for Eden's Verse Furor. This is the second of 4 new raid encounters made available by patch 5.2 in Final Fantasy XIV, Echoes of a Fallen Star. The devs were pretty gusty for storming onto the scene, fanning the flames of their passion and taking 2 bosses we've seen so much and somehow turning them into a breath of fresh air. My name is MTQcapture and I'll be your raid guide. We begin fighting only Garuda. Pharaoh's Storm will spawn 2 large feather blades on opposite sides of Garuda in a random position. Massive conal attacks will then shoot out from these blades, and players will need to move to the sides of the boss unaffected by the blades to avoid the attack. Super Storm will deal high raid-wide damage. Healers beware. Next, 2 players will be marked by these blue markers. If you look closely, you'll notice that each circle has 2 floating orbs above it, indicating that the circle should be shared by 2 players to minimize damage and debuffs. Players inside the blue circle will be afflicted with a magic vulnerability debuff, so unfortunately you can't just stack the 2 marked players together to satisfy the number requirements. Once the blue circle attack goes off, an AoE circle will be left on the ground, and all players should avoid these as necessary. Next, a large blue circle indicator will form in the center of the platform. This attack will knock back all players from the center. To avoid potentially being pushed into the wall and killed, players can stand on the edge of the blue circle or use a knockback immunity. Storm of Fury is a large point-blank AoE attack around Garuda. All players will need to move out of this as necessary. At the same time, 2 players will be tethered to Garuda, and large conal attacks will soon target them. To avoid excess damage from overlap, the 2 tethered players should move away from each other. Healers be ready to top everyone off after this combo. Next, Garuda will fly into the center and cast Vacuum Slice, dividing the platform in half. Be aware that players will not be able to traverse this void line once it's up. Occluded Front will spawn a number of wind orbs on each side of the void slice. Soon after, all players in each wind orb will be knocked towards the center. Players will need to pre-position themselves between the orbs or within the safe areas to avoid the orb explosions after the knockback. After this combo, a proximity-based damage marker will appear on the platform, Garuda will disappear, and Ifrit will spam down in her place. Hands of Flame will first target the tank with a tether before charging them, dealing damage and applying the lightheaded debuff on them. This debuff will make players susceptible to a long-lasting stun debuff if they get hit by a similar concussion-inducing attack while suffering from lightheadedness. Next up, a player will be marked by this orange marker and then have 4 Hands of Hell tethers applied to them. These tethers can be picked up by 3 other people and spread apart so that no one player is taking more than 1 hit and getting concussed or killed. Instant Incineration will target the primary target with this very obvious red marker. This is a tank buster, so make sure you pop those cooldowns. At the same time, Eruption Telegraphs will appear on the platform and all players should move out of these as necessary. Eventually, Ifrit will spawn a number of orbs around the platform that will explode in wide circles. He will appear in front of one and cast Hot Foot, kicking the orb away. This forms a safe zone from the orb explosions, and all players will need to pre-position themselves in this area to avoid damage. Inferno Howl will deal high raid-wide damage. Healers be ready. At this point, Garuda will return to the platform and tanks will need to make sure they have enmity on both. As you can imagine, you'll need to deal with both of their mechanics at the same time. Vacuum Slice will again divide the platform. Make sure you're not standing in the middle. Eruption Telegraphs will then appear under players. Move away as necessary. Occluded Front will spawn more wind orbs, and Ifrit will teleport to one of the orbs and kick it into a new position. All of this is happening while the knockback into the center is affecting all players and orbs. Players will again need to find the safe spots on their side and pre-position to avoid the orb explosions after the knockback. Immediately after, blue circles will form around players. Make sure you have 2 people sharing these attacks. Hands of Hell will target another player with the 4 spreadable tethers. Have 3 other players grab the excess tethers from this player and spread out to avoid overlap. Next up, Pharaoh's Storm will form the blades around Garuda, and players will need to move to her safe sides to avoid the attack. At this point, Garuda and Ifrit will combine and form Raktapaxa. This transition will deal high raid-wide damage, so be ready with cooldowns and shields. 5 circles will target the platform, forming 3 safe spots. Move into these safe zones and then get ready to adjust for the next Pharaoh's Storm blade dodge. Hands of Flame will target the primary target for attack and form large AoEs on either side of the boss. Players will need to move into the safe center strip to avoid damage. Next up, 2 players will be marked for the blue circles and will need a partner to share that damage with them. At the same time, another spreadable tether is forming that should be grabbed and moved apart by any free players. Eruptions will then target the platform, and all players need to make sure they're out of the way. Boss clones will rush towards the tethered players, forming a very small safe zone in the boss's original position. So all players must be ready to move into that spot to avoid death. Next, another blue circle knockback from the center. Make sure you don't get knocked into the wall. Immediately after, GARUFRIT will jump to the center and begin to cast Conflag Strike. More fire circles will form around the platform, and players will need to move into the safe zones and then dodge the incoming set of eruptions. This will occur a few times, all while the boss is still casting Conflag Strike. Near the end of the Conflag Strike cast, players will notice this massive 270-degree frontal cone telegraph form. All players will need to move behind this boss to avoid death. At this point, these mechanics will repeat with some overlap until the boss is down. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head into Eden's Verse Iconoclasm. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.